No one saw it coming, at least not to this degree. When Disney announced a live-action reimagining of a timeless classic, most people assumed it would be a guaranteed hit. Snow White is one of the most beloved fairy tales in cinematic history, so how could it possibly fail? But as the buzz built, the production's every move was scrutinized. Whispers of creative overreach mingled with rumors of script rewrites and inflated budgets. Fans who initially felt curiosity soon developed a creeping sense of doubt. And once Snow White 2025 finally appeared, the backlash became deafening, fueled by complaints about its star, its storyline, and even its perplexing final scenes. Most fairy tale updates stir up at least a little controversy, especially when a beloved story is changed to fit modern sensibilities. But the uproar here is on another level entirely. It goes beyond simple nostalgia. The reaction is a collective roar from fans who feel this adaptation has strayed so far from the original that it's nearly unrecognizable. Viewers are bickering over lost plotlines, baffling new themes, and a lead actress who openly challenged the very heart of the classic. Worse yet, there's word that Disney itself is quietly trying to move away from anything related to the film, like burying embarrassing evidence before it can do more damage. At the center of this unfolding drama stands Rachel Zegler, the actress portraying Snow White. Her outspoken remarks about fair pay, creative direction, and social messages set off a firestorm. While some applaud her bold stance, others accuse her of alienating half the potential audience. The situation spiraled when mockingly empty theaters showed just how far the film had fallen from safe bet to historic flop. Even many fans who once championed fresh interpretations of fairy tales admit something about this entire project feels severely off. Let's break down how we reached this point and why this might be one of the most disastrous remakes in Disney's history. From the moment Disney announced Rachel Zegler would be the new Snow White, the internet churned with curiosity. People knew her from previous roles, singing, acting, brimming with youthful energy, and many expected an exciting twist on a cherished classic. But as production details emerged, it became clear Rachel wouldn't be playing the demure love princess. In numerous interviews, she insisted that this Snow White was nothing like the 1937 version. She made pointed remarks about the original film being outdated, and teased that the new storyline would revolve around leadership and independence rather than romance. What started as mild controversy soon escalated when Rachel's comments took on a sharper tone. At one point, she suggested she should be paid hourly for every moment she spent in the iconic dress, which prompted eye rolls from those who felt that's not how typical Hollywood contracts work, especially with a massive studio. Later, she appeared to label certain critics of the film as belonging to a specific demographic, resistant to progress. Within days, social media was flooded with reactions. Supporters hailed her as a champion for modern storytelling, while critics saw her statements as entitled, condescending, and disrespectful to the original source. The more she talked, the larger the fire grew. It wasn't just about how her Snow White wouldn't dream of true love anymore. It was about how she seemed to dismiss the original film's legacy entirely. Disney tried to contain the damage by pointing to the new film's empowering vision, but the negativity only intensified. People who might have otherwise given the adaptation a fair shot suddenly felt alienated. And that was just the beginning. Little did the public know, there were even bigger problems lurking behind the scenes. And some watchers say Rachel's blunt honesty only fanned the flames that were already smoldering in secret. But that wasn't the whole story. Skeptics and fans alike murmured, tapping into rumors of deeper dysfunction. After all, a single star's controversial remarks don't usually cause a multi-hundred-million-dollar film to tank. Something else had to be going on, and the more fans dug, the more suspicious they became. Soon after the uproar around Rachel's comments, curious reports trickled out that Disney might be pulling Snow White 2025 merchandise from store shelves. No official statement confirmed it, but several hints suggested a quiet, strategic retreat. Normally, for a film of this scale, you'd see a deluge of products, weeks or even months before release: costumes, dolls, mugs, and every bit of teen paraphernalia you could imagine. Yet photos circulated online showed barren displays where Snow White items were either missing entirely or replaced with older Disney princess merchandise. Speculation grew rampant. Was Disney truly that spooked by negative fan sentiment? Or was the rumor exaggerated by online commentators hoping for drama? Some believed the backlash was so intense that retailers became wary about stocking the items, anticipating low sales. Others guessed that Disney, reeling from test screenings, had quietly scrapped major product lines to cut its losses. This situation only fueled more talk that the adaptation itself must be in serious trouble. If the usual wave of synergy marketing was being abandoned, whatever the exact reason, the rumor of merchandise disappearing was yet another flicker in a growing blaze of controversy. For fans, it was almost a surreal sight. Disney rarely backs off from promotional opportunities, especially with a flagship fairy tale property. A sense of foreboding settled in. If the mighty House of Mouse was in retreat, that probably didn't bode well for the movie's overall fate. And it was a fate shaped not just by star power and marketing, but also by the film's complicated production, sequela, labyrinth of rewrites, reshoots, and spiraling costs that left those who followed the story scratching their heads. But how did a fairy tale get this messy? People asked. One can't help but wonder if, from the very beginning, the new Snow White had been a collision of clashing visions. Behind every blockbuster stands an enormous machine of producers, writers, directors, and technical specialists, trying to bring a vision to life. In the case of Snow White 2025, that machine was rumored to be breaking down at multiple points. Even before the film's public meltdown, insiders whispered that the script had been heavily revised, multiple times, each rewrite shifting the tone and direction. The project started, according to these rumors, with a relatively faithful approach, a heartfelt retelling with some modern flourishes. But as studio mandates and creative ambitions piled on, that balance quickly tipped into chaos. Early leaks hinted at friction, a decision to remove the central love story entirely, an edgy attempt to depict Snow White as a quasi-revolutionary figure, and the near elimination of the seven dwarfs in favor of magical creatures, to avoid perpetuating stereotypes. Every big change was followed by pushback, both from within Disney's ranks and from fans who caught wind of the differences. Then came the reshoot's 3 different rounds. If rumors are to be believed, each aimed at solving newly discovered problems. But by the third wave, it seemed the film was falling into narrative quicksand. Those reshoots became the talk of movie circles, especially once the budget ballooned far beyond initial estimates. Each time they tried to fix a messy scene or tone down an unpopular angle, new complications emerged. Critics who eventually saw the finished product said it felt like several disjointed ideas smashed together. One moment you'd see a deep, dramatic take on Snow White's role in a kingdom. The next, a wacky comedic number with jarring costumes. The film's editing, they argued, couldn't reconcile so many conflicting visions, like trying to stitch together pieces from different puzzles. While multiple reshoots aren't unheard of for big-budget films, they usually happen quietly, with minimal rumor. In this case, it seemed too massive to hide. By the time Disney confirmed the final release date, people were bracing for some strange brew, wondering if it could possibly come together into a coherent experience. Yet the underlying question grew. Did the studio and filmmakers truly lose faith in this project along the way? Every sign pointed to yes, and fans were on the edge of their seats for all the wrong reasons. For generations, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs represented wholesome innocence, an enchanting romance, and the power of friendship triumphing over evil. That classic story, though simple, had a charm that resonated across decades. So when word got out that the romantic subplot in Snow White 2025 was drastically minimized or all but removed, fans didn't just feel curious. Many felt outright betrayed. Sure, some welcomed a modern take that didn't revolve around a prince saving the day. But others questioned why the film even carried the same title if the themes were so radically changed. The dwarves, a beloved core of the story, were replaced by CGI magical creatures in early concepts. Though the final version was murky and confusing about these changes, the studio seemed torn between wanting to be sensitive to portraying dwarf characters respectfully, while also seeking fresh new angles. But the result, many argued, was a half-step in every direction that pleased no one. Rumors circulated that legitimate actors of short stature had been robbed of roles, stirring yet another wave of controversy. Even fans generally open to modernization lost confidence after glimpsing leaked images. They worried that the essence of the fairy tale was being overshadowed by forced moral lessons and side plots. The final blow came when advanced screenings confirmed that the story seemed to revolve less around Snow White's personal growth or relationships, and more around broad statements of empowerment that critics called preachy and disconnected. As reviews poured in, the consensus was that the film had no center for a classic about innocence, imagination, and hope. The new adaptation felt weighed down by attempts to be everything at once, and so, by the time the official debut arrived, the magic was gone for a huge portion of the fanbase. Those who dared to see it reported a disconcerting mix of social messaging, feeble comedic relief, and a character whose journey felt more like a sermon than a fable. Snow White loyalists were left shaking their heads, muttering, "This isn't the story I grew up with." But that wasn't the whole story. There was also the final sequence to discuss. A bizarre ending that took confusion to new heights. If there's one part of Snow White 2025 that has truly baffled viewers, it's the climactic final scene. Instead of any sort of classic resolution, gossip has it that the movie ended with a party sequence, everyone dressed in matching white outfits, dancing to a tune that some described as surreal. On paper, it might have seemed whimsical. In practice, many viewers called it completely out of place. The abrupt shift from the film's scattered storyline to a uniform dance routine felt more like a music video cameo than a fairy tale. Conclusion: people who disliked the movie often point to this ending as a perfect snapshot of the larger problem, a style that rarely felt like Snow White. Throughout the film, character arcs were introduced, then abandoned, while comedic bits clashed with random dramatic undertones. Any nod to the classic romance had been sidelined to near invisibility, only to have the entire cast bounce around cheerfully at the end. Some watchers described it as an unsettling fever dream, an overblown attempt at delivering a grand finale that ended up highlighting how disjointed the rest of the narrative was. Viewers across social media posted reaction videos, sarcastic memes, and scathing comments about how they felt robbed of an actual emotional payoff. Instead of leaving audiences with a sense of wonder, the final minutes prompted confusion and sometimes outright laughter in the theater. An adaptation can certainly spin the story in new directions, but the majority consensus was that such an iconic fairy tale needed at least some anchor to the original themes. In chasing modern angles and twist endings, the film ended up with a tone so scrambled that even the cast's best efforts couldn't rescue it. But that strange dance is only half the problem. Some critics observed, Snow White 2025 apparently carried its own unusual approach to pacing, dialogue, and comedic timing throughout, making the film feel neither comedic nor dramatic enough to satisfy either category. The star at the center, Rachel, might have been the face of the controversy, but the structural issues ran deeper than any single performance. And while fans debated artistic choices, the studio faced a more pressing concern: the astronomical budget and the real risk of losing hundreds of millions of dollars. When you're dealing with a multi-hundred-million-dollar movie, every misstep is magnified. Reports suggest Snow White 2025 went well past $250 million in production costs alone, accounting for principal photography, special effects, lavish sets, and the repeated add in a promotional budget that initially looked massive before being scaled back, plus the manufacturing and distribution of planned merchandise. And you're looking at a potentially colossal bill that needed a blockbuster turnout just to break even. From a corporate perspective, the cracks started showing once early reviews hammered the film. Studio executives apparently pulled back promotional activities, fearing a bigger fiasco if they kept pushing a doomed product. Theater owners reported underwhelming presale numbers. Even the hardcore Disney loyalists, who typically show up for every live-action release, expressed reservations. By opening weekend, numbers were dismal. It became clear that recouping costs was unlikely, and any hope of a surprise second wind at the box office seemed far-fetched. Insiders began murmuring about how this would reflect on Disney's leadership. Bob Iger, who had expressed visions of balancing classic enchantment with new age relevance, found himself at the center of blame. Critics asked if the strategy of remaking beloved animated hits had run its course, especially when the final product deviated so drastically from what made the source material a treasure. Worse yet, shareholders started demanding answers. Why had so much money been sunk into a film that alienated its core audience? People close to the studios say that behind closed doors, the blame game rages on. Some accuse the creative team of going off the rails, while others point fingers at top executives for approving radical changes that undermined the story. In the end, the brand that produced so many box office smashes was saddled with a potential record-breaking flop. We might be witnessing the end of an era, predicted one industry analyst, hinting that Disney could rethink its entire approach to live-action remakes. But even that shift wouldn't fix the tarnished image or the crater left by Snow White 2025. After a whirlwind of negative coverage, a star embroiled in controversy, and an avalanche of online criticism. Everyone's left wondering how Disney will recover. For years, the studio relied on nostalgic rehashes to draw crowds, counting on brand recognition to offset any creative risks. But if the meltdown of Snow White 2025 taught them anything, it's that audiences won't blindly embrace these remakes when they feel the essence of the original is lost in translation. Sentimentality only goes so far. Some insiders suggest that future projects will undergo more rigorous test screenings, with particular attention paid to ensuring the final cut still resembles the beloved story audiences expect. Others believe Disney might hit pause on revisiting iconic fairy tales, at least temporarily. The fiasco could also encourage more creative caution. Ballooning budgets and constant script meddling might be replaced by tighter, more faithful adaptations that don't stray too far from source material. After all, the uproar from fans made one point abundantly clear: simply slapping the Disney logo on a classic property doesn't guarantee success. On a deeper level, the controversy calls into question the balance of social messaging in mainstream entertainment. While many audiences welcome progressive ideas, they still want a coherent story and compelling characters. If social commentary feels forced or overshadowing, people tend to recoil, especially if it means tearing down a cherished narrative without offering something equally captivating in its place. What will happen to other forthcoming live-action remakes? Will the fiasco surrounding Snow White 2025 cast a long shadow over future releases? The film's financial fallout is already massive, and the brand's reputation has taken a serious hit. Whether Rachel Ziegler's public stance eventually evolves or remains as fiery as ever remains to be seen. For better or worse, her name is now entwined with this production's meltdown, and she may face challenges in securing further big-budget roles, unless she manages to reinvent public perception. As for Disney, it's a harsh lesson in how quickly trust can unravel when fans feel the magic has been replaced by heavy-handed preaching and jumbled storytelling. So here we stand at the end of a twisted fairy tale that cost hundreds of millions of dollars and left behind an almost shocking wave of disappointment. For all its good intentions, modernizing a well-worn classic, showcasing a strong female lead, and injecting timely themes, Snow White 2025 has instead become a cautionary tale of how not to remake a beloved story. From Rachel Ziegler's polarizing interviews to the rumored merchandise pullback, from the frantic reshoots to the bizarre final dance scene, every element seemed to drift off course. The result? One of the largest critical and commercial disasters in recent Disney history. The bigger question is what this means for the future. Does the meltdown mark a turning point, prompting Disney and other studios to reevaluate the entire concept of big-budget reimaginings? Or will they soldier on, hoping that Snow White 2025 is a fluke rather than a forecast? One thing seems certain. Fans have spoken loudly, and they've shown that if you meddle too drastically with a classic, even the mighty Disney name can't save you. In chasing a new message, the studio may have fumbled the timeless magic that made Snow White endearing for generations. Still, the story doesn't end here. Conversations will continue, dissecting every choice that led to this fiasco. While many folks wonder if a major course correction could redeem the film on streaming platforms or in an eventual director's cut, but with so many fundamental flaws, it's hard to imagine an easy fix. Perhaps the real moral of this story is that classic fairy tales don't need to be stripped of their essence to stay relevant. Sometimes, preserving the heartbeat of what made them special in the first place is more important than adding layers of commentary. And so, this chapter in Disney's live-action saga closes with a cautionary note. Even the most iconic fairy tale can become a cautionary nightmare if the storytellers lose sight of what captured our hearts to begin with. Who knows what will happen when the dust finally settles? The fiasco surrounding Snow White 2025 might well be the turning point that reshapes Disney's approach to these grand remakes. Or maybe it'll be remembered as a wild misadventure, overshadowed by whatever blockbuster the studio churns out next. Either way, the lesson stands. If you tamper too heavily with a cultural cornerstone, be prepared for the castle walls to quake. Because sometimes, the biggest shock isn't the new direction itself, it's realizing just how far you can stray from happily ever after when the guiding principle of storytelling is cast aside.